I'm going to give the floor to Lord Christopher Monckton, joining us from Australia. It's like 6 in the morning, I guess, there. I appreciate him joining us. He is the #1 guy out there fighting the global tyrants and their carbon taxes. And he's written an article for WorldNet Daily. It's also up on Science and Public Policy. Christopher Monckton of Brenchley joins us, and he is over in Australia to see what Agenda 21 is really like. Agenda 21, fascism's new face. They're a few years ahead of us in Australia under the climate tyranny, and he joins us to break it down. Lord Monckton, thank you for coming on with us.
Alex, it's a real pleasure to be with you, and congratulations on your wonderful interview with Piers Morgan on gun control. I wonder how many tens of millions have seen it now.
It is tens of millions airing on every TV station out there, and also tens of millions online. But you know, I actually was under the weather that day and blew up at him. But I'm glad I did, because it got people out of their coma. We need to get aggressive with these people. And he tried to spin it that I'm being anti-UK. I'm actually pro-UK and England. I want you to be a sovereign country, not under EU domination. My ancestors come from Wales and England and Scotland and Ireland. Piers Morgan's tried to spin it, though, and so is the British press, that I'm being anti-British. I'm anti-being disarmed. It's not British to have your weapons taken. In fact, you guys always had the right to keep them their arms until it was taken by the collectivists. You want to briefly speak to that?
Well, certainly. I mean, we had a shooting incident like the one that has provoked the latest round of demands for gun control in the US. This was at Dunblane in Scotland, and unfortunately it happened during a socialist government. And of course, whenever the socialists get the chance to tighten up on legislation, they will. And so there was a knee-jerk reaction in Parliament, and a law was passed to take away our handguns, which were almost entirely held in private collections and were shot privately on ranges under supervision. It was all very well controlled, as you can imagine, in the UK. And anyway, all of that was swept away. But the result was the interesting thing. Crime involving handguns went up by 40% the moment they took our handguns away. Because once you drive the ownership of guns underground, then all you do is you criminalize it, and that increases the use of guns in crime. It does not reduce it.
It certainly does. Now, you talk about the new face of fascism, Agenda 21. People are starting to wake up to it, but you've traveled to Australia that's been captured by this, even though the people are awake and don't like it. In polls I've seen, it doesn't matter what government they put in, it just continues. Break down how draconian it is in a country, what, 4 or 5 years ahead of other nations?
Well, that's right. See, the European dictatorship and the dictatorship of Julia Gillard, the communist from Wales who runs Australia at the moment, and is at the moment herself facing an extremely serious criminal investigation, which is getting very, very close to her. And that's one of the reasons why she's announced the election that they're about to have, and she's announced it 7 months before it's going to be held. The other reason why she's announced an earlier election, incidentally, is that Kevin Rudd, the man whom she displaced with an internal coup in the Labour Party, it's the kind of thing that communists do to each other all the time, she had heard that next month he was going to mount a leadership challenge to get back the premiership from her, and that he had the numbers to do it. She's become very unpopular, even within her own party. And of course, she's even more unpopular, I think, than Obama with her opponents here. And so she heard he was mounting this challenge, and that he'd got the numbers in the Parliamentary Labour Party to win. And so what she did was to announce the date of the election very hastily, because then if he were to announce a leadership challenge, it would seem to the party like downright disloyalty, not just to her, but to the party as a whole, and then he wouldn't have the numbers. So it was a masterstroke on her part. And of course, she can also take advantage of the fact that during the campaigning, which has effectively already begun, she can do all of her campaigning on the government's dime, while the opposition can't. So she's hoping to gain advantage from it, but she is getting very close to having her collar felt in a criminal investigation. I can't give more details over the air, but it's certainly something which I'm not sure she'll even last out until September, because they are getting that close to her now. But in the meantime, she and her government introduced what is called a carbon tax. They were originally going to charge larger companies and fossil fuel companies and big manufacturers and farmers and miners and fishermen, they were going to charge them $23 for every ton of carbon dioxide they emitted as part of their electricity use. It was going to be enormously, cripplingly expensive. It was going to shut down the economy of Australia. Unfortunately, the opposition here, led by Tony Abbott, who is a very thoughtful, quiet, and extremely determined man, managed to divert her away from doing that. And in the end, she cut and ran and said, no, we can't charge $23 a tonne when the rest of the world is only paying, or at least the EU, which is the only other place that's really got a carbon tax, is only paying at the moment kind of $2 or $3 a tonne. And so she decided to link the carbon tax here with the European trading scheme so that the same price is charged for carbon dioxide here as in Europe. And of course, she will go on the television and say that what she's demonstrating is leadership in doing this, but the rest of the world is conspicuously not following. Even, of course, Obama's United States is not going to have the carbon tax. And of course, if you go further north to Canada, where Stephen Harper now has, as a Conservative, an overall majority as Prime Minister, a rare thing in their electoral system, he is shutting down all this environmental nonsense, all these creepy agencies that are going around trying to close down the economies of the West. While here in Australia, of course, these agencies are rampant. I'm speaking to you at the moment from the summit of Mount Lofty in Australia, just in South Australia, round the back of Adelaide. It's the most beautiful country around here. But of course, this is the middle of their summer, so it's fairly dry. And they all have, all the farmers up here, I'm staying with one of them, they all keep small dams that they've built to retain a bit of water to make sure that their stock and their crops can be watered when the rains don't come, which they don't come for 6 months of the year and sometimes for 7 years at a time. And what is happening is that in has come the Natural Resources Management Board of South Australia, one of the most hated bureaucracies on earth. And it's going round interfering with people's right to take water from the dams that they and their ancestors have built. As a result, farms are closing at so large a rate that since the 1970s, something like 100,000 farmers in Australia have already gone out of business. Not because they can't make money in farming, because they're pretty good at it out here. It's the biggest industry in Australia. No, it's because they're being pestered by so many bureaucrats. Just down the road from where I'm speaking, a few years ago, there was a guy extracting the water from his dam, or in fact it was from a neighbour's dam, but he had permission to do it, so that he could water his stock. And there were snoopers, this is how they do it, snoopers had been hiding for weeks behind a hedge on a hill nearby, watching him through binoculars. They didn't realise that he was supplying this water to his stock. And they eventually did a raid at 11 o'clock at night, while he was working on one of the pumps that wasn't functioning. They pounced on him. They drove their utility vehicle at him, which had a rhubarb on the front. They hit him with that, and he still has pain from that to this day, 6 years later. And then they left him for dead. And the next thing they did, realizing they'd done wrong, was to go and report that he had done to them what they had done to him. So when he went a week later or 2 weeks later to the police station after he got out of hospital to say that he'd been attacked in this way, he was immediately arrested on the ground, quite specious, that he had attacked them. That's what's going on here. I am now investigating this case, and I'm about to do an amicus curiae brief to the court that eventually convicted him of illegally taking water from that creek, because the conviction was wrong. I've already established that. He had taken none of the water they said he'd taken for any purpose other than supplying his stock, which he had written permission from the government to do.
Well, what's incredible is they're harassing everybody. I mean, I see the Australian...
It's Alex, because what we're going to do is, it looks to me at the moment, and I've got to do a little bit of further investigation, it looks to me at the moment as though these three agents of the Natural Resources Management Board committed attempted murder. Because that's what it is. If you drive your vehicle at somebody, you knock them down, and you leave them for dead, that's attempted murder. So we're not going to be patsies out here anymore. I've been talking to farmers all over the state. They're absolutely boiling furious at what's being done to them.
And have you noticed now the government that took the semi-auto rifles, now they want the bolt action and single shot. This is an authoritarian takeover. They're handing the entire continent over to the communist Chinese. That's on record. 99% of the rare earth minerals of Australia now run by state-run Chinese communist operations. But I see the newscast, mainline TV out of Australia. You've been there many times. I've never been there, where they show sheep farmers who own the land, and they say, sorry, you can't graze anymore. This has to be off use for the earth. Your sheep's flatulence is bad for the atmosphere. I mean, this is a real hardcore tyranny. People want to know what it's...
There is a notorious case here, that of Peter Spencer, who actually went on hunger strike to draw attention to the fact that
tied himself to a tower.
Ancestors had been farming the land for 3 generations, and then, in order to comply with some useless obligation under the now expired Kyoto Protocol, the Australian government arbitrarily said, right, we're taking away your right to farm your land because it's been designated as a carbon sink. And, of course, they're doing this all over Australia. They're driving farmers off their own land. And, of course, the property right in Australia is protected by the Constitution. So what they're craftily doing is they're just saying, we're not taking away your land, we're just telling you can't actually farm it. That, of course, renders the land worthless, and therefore, in effect, they have taken away your property right, but they've managed to dodge and duck and dive. And unfortunately, the courts here, rather like in the United States, are poodles of the government that pays their lavish salaries and pensions, and they will just not find against the government when the government behaves in this way.
All right, Lord Monckton, let me stop you for...
The mineral class, the 3 big industries here are farming, mining and fishing. All 3 of these are now up in arms because the Australian government and its various sinister agencies is attacking and attacking and attacking. They're trying to close Australia down, and the background to this, Alex, is Agenda 21, this UN program, all 40 chapters of it, which was first produced in 1992 at that ridiculous Rio Earth Summit. And the idea of Agenda 21 is to close down the economies of the West by saying that in the name of the environment, we must reduce the population of the Earth by 9/10, and we must do that, according to Bill Gates, by vaccination. He actually said it in a lecture I've seen on the internet. I couldn't believe it until I watched it. These people are completely out of control. And I made a speech just last night in one of the farming villages here, and the people in the audience were astonished when I told them this. And at first they thought, you know, is Monckton some kind of a flaming nutter? Is Alex Jones some kind of a nutter?
No, we're upset about what's happening. I've got to stop you, sir. We're going to break. We're going to come back and have you continue. Lord Christopher Monckton is our guest. Lord Monckton, what do you think I should say to Piers Morgan if I see him again? I mean, didn't he get run out of your country?
Well, I think what you should say to him is that he should go back where he came from and not try to interfere in the internal affairs of the United States. I mean, yes, you know, all these lefties are the same in the media. They all think that nobody should be allowed guns, that the police state should be allowed to push everybody around. And, well, you and I rather disagree with that, Alex. And, you know, it has been said by some that you are right on the extreme fringe. Well, hey, somebody occasionally has to stand out a little bit from the crowd to try and warn the crowd of what's about to hit them. And there is no doubt now that the governing class worldwide is increasingly tying itself together, using excuses such as climate change, Agenda 21, environment, using gun control as something we can all unite behind. This is the kind of slogan you hear. And so Piers Morgan is just part, if you like, of the establishment or the governing class, or what the French call the classe politique, who are increasingly remote and cut off from ordinary people like thee and me, who are simply trying to get on and do a job of work and not be interfered with by our rulers. And, of course, the whole idea of the United States was not to be interfered with by your rulers. And unfortunately now, even in the United States, your government is trying to turn itself into a tyranny. The Environmental Protection Agency, just like the South Australia Bureau of Natural Resources Management, is trying to take over and interfere and effectively to legislate by the back door and to push people around, and you have these little tin pot officials in their shiny shoes and their polished suits rushing around in government cars, pestering farmers all over the place. And the Lord Monckton Foundation, which has been established here in Australia, is going as its first battle to take these people on and say, if you go around bullying farmers, for instance, and threatening them that you will drive them off their land, and that's one farmer I've talked to already has been threatened with that. If you go around and cheat them by saying that their reservoirs are 10 million litres when they're only 5 million litres, because if they're over 10 million, you're allowed to regulate and interfere. If you go around cheating like that, in future, we will have you for it. You will be up in either the civil or more probably the criminal court.
Other points you'd like to make, Lord Monckton, about where this attack worldwide is going? People are starting to wake up to Agenda 21, but is it enough? What do we do?
Well, I think the first thing is keep a very close eye on every environmental law that gets passed, because you'll find that what Agenda 21 does is that it works chiefly at local level. What these agents of the UN have done is they've gone round to local authorities and convinced them one by one that they should implement Agenda 21, because no national government would go as far as that. And there's an outfit called ICLEI, I-C-L-E-I. And if your local authority belongs to that organization, then boy, are you in trouble. These are the new dictators. They operate by stealth. And their vice chair recently said that in future, the individual must subject himself to the collective. And so this is straightforward, outright, in-your-face communism, dressed up as though it were to do with the environment. I call them the traffic light tendency, the green's too yellow to admit they're really reds. But they're operating bureaucratically through your local authority. And you need to find out, and you need to get onto your local authority representatives, your local councillors, etc., and you need to say to them that if they belong to ICLEI, you will vote for whichever party says that it will leave that organisation and have nothing to do with Agenda 21. You have to get Agenda 21 onto the agenda of local elections and make it clear that any candidate who supports Agenda 21 will not get elected by you. And once they all begin to realise that Agenda 21 is hated and feared by the people, as it should be, then they will break free. And just to let you know one piece of rather interesting news, a map was produced by ICLEI of the United States, which showed the places where humans could and could not go. More than half the map was covered in red, where humans were allowed to go under no circumstances at all. Nearly all the remainder was coloured in yellow, where you could go with a permit from the socialist state if you were very lucky and if they agreed to give you one. But there were a few tiny areas, most of them military installations to keep the people in line, and only a few, effectively, concentration camps where all the population of America would in future have to reside. And opponents of Agenda 21 took that map, they got hold of it at the last minute, they took that map to the US Senate and they showed it to senators and their staff hours before the Senate was...
And it shot it down. We're out of time. Lord Monckton, we're out of time. I don't think you can hear me over Skype when I talk to you at first. God bless you. Thank you so much for the time, sir.
Okay, all the best.
All right, we'll talk to him again soon. ProPure is introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. This is the Pro One by ProPure. You wanted it, you got it. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium fluoride. You have a system that cuts out the sodium fluoride and up to 95% of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Advanced manufacturing technology combines silver-impregnated white ceramic with new Aquamedics advanced media for removal of fluoride and other heavy metals, all in one filter element. It cuts out the acid derivative of fluoride. It is the only one that does it. And out of the gates, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the only system that in one unit helps reduce or remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, ammonia, and chlorine, hydrofluorosilicic acid, the most common form of fluoride not covered by other fluoride filter brands, and sodium hexafluorosilicate. This is a revolution against the tyrants. They love putting the toxic acid base of fluoride into your water. They love the fact that it's an adjuvant supercharging the trace Prozac in the water and the hormones and the other chemicals. By cutting out fluoride, you cut out the turbocharger in all the poison being artificially introduced into your body. This is what I use. It's a win-win. You get a high-quality product at the lowest price. You support the InfoWar. Get your Pro Pure with the new Pro 1 filter today at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139.